So, hi guys, this is Girls Interrupted. How are you today?
Good, good, excited.
Nice, nice. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit, or we talk to you guys a little bit about boundaries today. Something that it's a pretty trendy topic, I think, but
Mhm,
we don't really usually talk about it in terms of mental health.
mhm.
And I think it does need to be opened up a little bit more in terms of mental health. And Leslin, I know that you had an interaction with a woman just over social media, over
Yeah,
Instagram, and I wondered if you could just go into it a little bit, and then we'll jump off from there.
sure, sure. Okay, so let me just ground myself.
Hmm.
Okay, so this person responded to a post that I shared about what was it? I believe it was my 6 month in sobriety from marijuana. So I was sharing my experience from having gotten professional help through, working with professionals along with a sobriety program, a top step program that has really helped me profoundly changed the course of my life and the way that I perceive everything. So her comment was that she hadn't been receiving the same type of help and that it was quite a hopeless energy to it. She expressed that there was a lot of rejection, a lot of red tape for her. So and she also mentioned in the comment that sorry, this might be triggering, so trigger warning, that she had gone to hospitals like bleeding from attempted suicide and was turned away. So I thought at this point, okay, where's my head at right now, right? Because I need to also be mindful of my boundaries, my capacity. I am not a professional. I am also recovering. I'm only speaking from my experience. So how can I be of service in a way that maintains and honors and respects my own boundaries? So I transfer the conversation onto a private messaging, private chat, and I've gonna post some questions. And I really leaned on you guys at the time for some support and some guidance because frankly I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and I really appreciated the perspective that hey, you don't need to take on the responsibility for this because that was an automatic behavior, a conditioning that I have been working to reverse for the last since my recovery journey started. Um, excuse me, and how I uh, went on about that with that guidance and with this determination not to overstep my own boundaries was to say, have you tried, these types of resources? And towards the end, long story short, is that I provided her with as many resources that I knew of and that I could find, and sort of said, this is as far as I can go. It would be up to you to take on and look into these further. And I wish you well, because at the end of the day, um, the dialogue that I was receiving was very dismissive. And what I learned is that, at least through my personal experience, you guys can share yours after, is that yes, during my time, there was a time when I felt hopeless, when I felt like I wanted to give up. Um, and it was I was very fortunate that my loved ones got me to the hospital in time. And when I started learning about these resources, whether nothing's perfect, there were times when I had to work a little bit harder. But the thing is, like when I found this, it just took a little bit of a spark to say, hey, there's other options out there. And when those other options were presented to me, I took the opportunity to take my own initiative and to start grabbing onto anything, because that one little spark was enough for me to pursue my own sort of education and to lean on as many supports as I can, regardless of sometimes it doesn't work out, or sometimes you can't get through a hotline or something like that. You can't get the information that you're really looking for. But to me, it's like I also had to take responsibility for my own recovery, because that spark was that hope, right? And at the same time, it helps me recognize that it's up to me. I have to want my recovery. I have to want to work for it.
Right, right. And with this woman back in this interaction, you
Mm-hmm.
actually directed her to two professionals, right?
Yeah, so I found so I've known of a few resources. One is mdpac.com or .ca, I believe, which is a resource of physicians who are also psychotherapists that you can look into. You can get it's like a database of several physicians or many physicians, and you can get your family doctor to refer you to them and start working with them. And I believe some of them would be OHIP covered. And I also referred her to the CMHA in Vancouver. So that's I believe like you could just inquire and go through that. I don't think she's ever gone through that particular psychiatric facility before. So and I think I also advised her of Ability CBT, which is a free program in Ontario and I believe Manitoba, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a program that you can do on your own. With cognitive behavioral therapy tools within an app, and you just have to sign up on the website and complete a questionnaire, and that way they can pair you up with a counselor to walk you through the program.
Nice. Nice. That's really helpful. I think you
Mm-hmm.
handled that in a really good way.
Yes,
Like
and
honestly.
I will say that I had to self manage after that, to say that okay, this is as far as you can go. Like you have your own journey
Yeah,
to be mindful of, because you yourself are still stabilizing. You're still going through a lot of learning, and at the same time, I'm not a professional, which is it's like I can't do much more than here are some resources that were helpful for me, and that's it. Like
exactly.
that was my max. Yeah.
I think when people overshare or like can dump like a lot of emotional dumping, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's important to sort of do what Buddha does. Like I give, but I can only give so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so I think you did really well, like how you handled
Thank
it
you.
for sure,
Thank
for
you.
sure. Did you have any comments in you? Did you have anything you wanted to say about it?
Yeah, like speaking of Buddhist comments, it reminds me that it's like Buddha laid out the Eightfold Path and he said, this is the way to enlightenment, but I can only show you the map. I can't walk the path for you. And I think that's part of what you did, Leslin. You were like, this is what could work for you, but I can't do the work for you. And I think that's something
Mm.
that I've also learned through this journey. Like, I think when clear, like, well, it is up to you. I can
Mm.
tell you these tools and it's still up to you to practice. I remember I would feel all this anxiety about having to learn these skills, and I specifically remember I was so terrified about this concept of having to manage my own mental health
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of my life. And the nurse who was my most regular nurse, she's like, well, no one else is gonna do it for you. Who else is gonna do it for you? I'm like, the tough love, it's so true.
that
but
that
I'm
that was me too.
but I'm like, I needed to hear that. It was like loving, and she like listened to all of my concerns about it, and she like validated all my fears. But she wasn't gonna lie to me about how anyone else was going to do the hard work for me. That it was
Mm.
still up to me to
Mhm.
find that I don't know, is it discipline, motivation to do it? And it's only through actually doing the steps and actually practicing the skills that life is a lot better now.
Yeah,
So
I
I
would
have a
say
question.
I felt empowered through that. And like my psychiatrist as well in the beginning, it's like if you invest in this, you will come out a more resilient person. And that day one, I was like, oh, same thing that like that, and I was like, oh, I don't know, but it's true, and it's like it's like giving you your power back, or at the very least, um, taking off the blindfold to that power, and it's like it's in you, and yes, I know that you need help, and there is help, but it's also up to you to keep reaching for it.
Yeah, it's one of the kindest things you can do for yourself to
Mm.
know your self-worth and say, "Here, this is I wanna give to you, but also, yeah, I can't give all of myself." Right? Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you
Can't.
too, like, how do you set a boundary if you're uncomfortable doing it? Because that happens so many times, especially with family or anything like that. The closer the person is, I think, to you, the harder it is.
Yes, yes, it is. And that's something that I had to really learn. And when that family conversation happened, um, the thing is, when you set the boundaries with people who really genuinely love and care about you and what's best for you, it's it's a lot more of an open energy
True.
than like at least I was anticipating in my mind. I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be a disaster. But it's like, okay, let's figure out how we can work on this together, how we can create stronger and more open relationships. So and having these more difficult conversations in a safer place.
Yeah.
So I think it also depends on who you're setting the boundaries with, and if the person doesn't respect that so much, or they don't want to work with you, or they dismiss it, then you kind of know which direction that relationship needs to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've
So
been finding that what works is being able to verbalize what I actually need and what I'm feeling. Because, like in a functioning relationship, so I'm told these things should work. Like that you can assert and ask for what it is that you need for them to respect this or to do this thing.
mhm.
Um, and it also reminds me of one of my dysfunctional relationships was with my previous employer with a big corporate firm, and my therapist had to keep when I would bring these topics up in session, my therapist would say, "Oh, yeah, you have to keep reminding me you work in corporate because that's a dysfunctional relationship." Because where normally bringing up your needs and your feelings, if it's someone that cares about you in a functioning relationship, then changes are made and these things matter. But because it's work, they don't. They need X from you and they pay you money, and sometimes your feelings and your needs don't really matter.
Right. It's more of a
So,
transaction.
yeah, so it was, I think that really helped me because I had a model of functioning familial relationships. I'm still learning
Mhm.
what a functional parent-child relationship looks like. Um, but it's kind of, I guess, having those two extremes in my mind is helpful to know that sometimes there are dysfunctional relationships, and it's in those times when your feelings and your needs don't matter, then you got to protect yourself extra hard for your boundaries there.
So, Sydney, if you don't mind me asking, how did you handle those situations? Were the boundaries ever crossed or anything like that? Like, how did you handle it so it didn't get sticky?
To be honest, it was a completely toxic relationship, and I've since removed myself from that relationship. So, my new job, my new employers, my new coworkers, I think they're all a lot more I don't know, like supportive, genuinely caring about my well-being, and it's just a different workplace culture.
That's
So I
great.
think getting yourself, like having enough respect for yourself to, as you said, like realize your worth and let go of relationships that don't work anymore, where you are just being taken advantage of, and leaving that behind. Like, definitely learned stuff and it no longer serves. So I need to go where like I can thrive and not
Mhm.
just survive.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Very good way to put it. Did you have anything you wanted to say, Leslin?
No, I'm just happy for Sydney.
Okay, okay. I had a question though. I was gonna say, how do you say no and still remain flexible?
That is the question.
That's
I
a,
it would depend, I suppose, on what is being asked. Because, for example, if let's say, uh, what's a good situation to think about? It's like, could you um, change your schedule to help me to a doctor's appointment or something that I'm terrified of? And it's like, okay, uh, it's like on one hand you committed to your own appointment. On the other hand, let's say somebody you care about is terrified of this particular appointment and they need it. It's like you could maybe, I don't know, you could say, unfortunately, I can't because I have to honor my appointment. But perhaps I can attend another appointment with you if you maybe give me a little bit more notice.
yeah,
So
yeah,
kind of
exactly.
finding a way to compromise while also respecting your own needs. Like if let's say, what if you had a doctor's appointment as well, like that is really helpful for you and you need to attend it, and if first of all, if you try to cancel it, you could get charged. So it's like, how do you need to balance that, right? You need to balance honoring what you have committed to or what your needs are, and also trying to be helpful and be of service to others in a way that doesn't take away from your cup, as they say, because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's a good analogy. Yeah. I have a book here that I just got yesterday. Have you guys heard of the holistic psychologist?
No.
No?
Oh, how are you
The
liking
book
it?
is called How to Do the Work
Okay.
by Dr. Nicole LaPera. Let me just hold that up. And in it, it talks a lot about boundaries. It talks about how to set them, it talks about how to maintain them, and it talked a little bit about that no question, which I'm going to go back to.
I'm gonna add it to my Amazon wish list.
Yeah, exactly, right? Um, here it is. Here it is. Do, do, do. Actually, you know what? I'll go to the example. The example of just the mental sort of emotional boundary, and it was my the actual problem was my physical self feels uncomfortable and unsafe when my coworker constantly makes jokes about my appearance. And then the answer that she sort of came up with was to create space for my physical self to feel more comfortable or safe. I no longer want to be around people who make those types of jokes. And just to be able to create new pathways for the
Mm,
person, and an
mm,
understanding with your own self of what it's going to be like. And that's sort of like entering how to maintain how to maintain those boundaries, and I think that's the hardest thing to do. It's even
mm,
harder than setting the boundaries, is
mm,
actually maintaining them. And I don't know, Leslin, how do you maintain your boundaries?
mm.
Like, do you like
I
three
have.
strikes you're out type thing?
Sorry, what?
Three
What did you
strikes
say?
you're out, and then like you block them on the fourth.
Um,
Or depends? It
again, I think it really depends on the relationship. Like my family and I have like we've had to work at our relationship to get to where it is now, and where it is now is imperfectly wonderful. I think that there's even still sometimes, we fall into those automatic thoughts and behaviors. But the thing is, at least among us, there's like, hey, this is what's happening right now, and we ourselves are willing to take a step back, acknowledge that that's what's happening, and use that as a prompt to be more mindful of how we continue on with our thoughts and behaviors. And for me, I have been working on creating space between stimulus and response, because I was very reactive before, but that reaction can either be retreat completely, block everything out, or just unleash. So now
right.
I'm just trying to find a way to create that space so that I can understand that every situation is neutral, and it's my thoughts and behaviors that add color to them. And I need to be able to not allow external factors to just sweep me away every time, at whim. I want to be able to um, be in a state of acceptance, and also that balance to handling these types of any kind of situation that creates this arising uncomfortable negative energy, that creates not be uh, all of, it's like when you have this well, when you have a panic, when I had panic attacks, like these intense panic attacks, at the end of it I'm exhausted, and I'm like, what even just happened? What do I do now? So I don't want to be drained just because of like external situations, or even the way that I allow myself to be pulled into them.
100%. 100%. And that sort of leads into the next question, which I'll just put out there because we don't have too much time left. We have like 8 minutes.
Mhm.
But for both of you, how
Yeah.
do triggers connect to boundaries? And if someone triggers you, is that person responsible for
Mm.
crossing that boundary? What do you
Okay.
guys think?
So
Cindy,
I love that question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sydney.
I think not the first time, it's not their fault, but if you've talked to them before about that trigger and if it's malicious,
Mm.
then it kind of is their
yeah,
fault.
yeah,
But the first time, I don't think so. And the I think triggers are a signal, an indication that there's something deeper there that
Mm.
you want to explore, that you need to take the time and the space to explore.
Mhm.
But I think if it has manifested in a trigger, it's not gonna be a one and done kind of thing. Like you're not just gonna try to dig into it and suddenly you're resolved. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's kind of a big thing and it's gonna take its natural course and it'll take a couple of new experiences to reteach your brain and your body that
Mhm.
when this happens, you're still safe and you can handle it.
Mhm.
nice. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Leslin?
Yeah. So first question. I think that triggers and boundaries both give rise to an emotional reaction, but there's a difference. When we're triggered, whether it's like somebody says a word, or a gesture, or you're in a situation that connects you to past traumas, the emotional reaction is very intense and consuming. So, like I was saying earlier, like panic attacks. Again, because it just throws us back into traumas that we may not even be conscious of. But the good news is with triggers, at least what I found from my personal experience, is that they can be dissolved. So things that used to trigger me before, words that used to trigger me before, it doesn't happen now, because I've gotten through, I've been receiving a lot of support and education, and I've been practicing a lot, um, and creating those boundaries. Sort of like I found that my triggers have create a pathway to developing healthier boundaries. And I found that boundaries are a form of self love and self respect. So
Yeah,
if someone makes us feel uncomfortable or unsafe, then it's important that we set those boundaries. And that's something that I really had to work on because conditioning did not teach me that at all. Um, so we can communicate of how what was said or done made us feel and how we would like to be treated instead, which helps us um, foster healthier relationships with ourselves, but also with others. And like Singy was saying earlier, that it really depends on whether that other people are responsible, because once you've communicated that trigger and let's say they dismiss it or they say, oh, you're just being over dramatic or this and that, then at that point you would need to evaluate whether you can hold more conversations to give it more time for change, or whether that relationship needs to be walked away from.
that's right. That's right, completely. And I think also boundaries are something that are really, really important with mental health because of triggers and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's going to get triggered, but it's the coming out and saying like this is too much. I have to, without being too rigid and just,
Mm.
blocking everything. But
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's like sometimes um, it is unrealistic to think that other people, whether they're strangers or close friends, would always understand or recognize what would trigger us. So it is our responsibility to communicate them, and in turn, again, creating that dialogue, that healthy dialogue, like Cindy was saying earlier about like functional relationships. If that can happen, then you're creating a healthier flow within the relationship. But if somebody is, your boundaries aren't landing on them and they're not really taking it in, like, well, imagine if it was the other way around. Like, what if somebody was communicating their boundary to you, and you're like, nah, screw you. Like, I don't
yeah,
care. I'll keep doing
exactly,
what I'm doing.
exactly,
Then do you expect that person to, want to continue a relationship with you if you make them feel unsafe?
100%.
Yeah, and I think that reminds me of like I come from a math background and I've always like clung very strongly to facts and rationale. And this is one of those like wonderful things that your emotions can do for you. Like when I'm in tune with my emotions and I'm feeling that discomfort and I actually honor it, then it can prompt me to action. And sometimes that action is absolutely necessary. Instead of turning away from it and pretending like it doesn't bother me, I do
Yeah.
something about it. I tell them, I strike
Mm-hmm.
a boundary and I communicate it. That's yeah, that's been a big improvement in the relationships in my life.
Yeah.
Nice.
100%.
I think we're going to end it there just because of the time factor, but I love
Cool.
talking with you guys today. It was amazing.
Yeah, I'm so glad I was able to make it today.
I know, I know. So good to talk with you, Leslin and Sinyi.
Can I add just if anyone is interested in learning more about how to say yes or no strongly, there's a DBT thing called the Dime Game.
Oh,
And it's like 10 questions, and you figure out on that spectrum, do I say no really lightly, so 0 to 10 cents, you just do it nicely without being asked, or at $1 you like absolutely resist and you firmly don't do it. A 50 cents is something along the lines of you say that you would rather not, but you do it gracefully anyway. And it's like 10 different criteria, and that really changed things for me because I'm definitely a black and white thinker, and it was is like really helpful to have an actual framework to say where along the spectrum of gray, which is saying no. It's not just saying no and not saying no. You can like say no gently, you can say no really firmly. There's things in between those two extremes, and for me, I need some rules and guidelines, and having some of them, like what are your priorities, do they have authority over you, what are your goals, um, but a bunch of other questions that really helped me to begin to internalize that framework.
I love that. I love
Well,
that a lot. Thank you so much.
yeah, thanks for having us, Joanna.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
thank you,
worries.
Joanna.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys. See you next
Bye.
time.
Bye.